Good morning. Welcome to KS Home and Garden. I'm out here on July 28th, 2023, just checking out how my plants are doing after our first day of the heat wave. Yesterday it was very hot. There was a heat index that reached up to 98 degrees. Today the temperature is going to be 95 degrees with a heat index expected to be above 100. So after having pre-watered prior to the heat yesterday and also giving some organic fertilizer to my sweet potato plants and a couple of other plants because I saw what looked like phosphorus deficiencies, I'm back out here to check. The reason I emphasized organic for the fertilizer is because organic fertilizers do not burn the way the normal synthetic fertilizers do, so I did not have to worry about the heat having that effect, and I was still able to take care of the plants. So now let's take a little walk. After we look at this patio peach tree, it's a bonfire patio peach. I really like this. So these peaches are not going to be good to eat from what I've read and all the information I've seen, but they would be good to do something like a jelly or to make a pie. However, they don't seem to really have the mass on them. I don't feel the softness of a peach, but I still like the way it looks. This is doing well, and this is in the original pot that I got it from. I didn't put it in the ground because I wasn't sure where I wanted to place it, and I wanted to see whether it needed some, not shade, but some protection from wind. It said it does, so I have to figure that out. Okay. Here is a Blue Better salvia plant. I had a few of those that I grew from seed. By the way, everything that I have is either from seed or are volunteer plants, except some beefsteak tomato plants that my neighbor kindly gifted me. There are some more sunflowers. There's another stevia plant, marigold, and finally my okra plant is coming on. This is the third planting because earlier in the season our temperatures would go from 90 to 30. It was really strange, or unusual I should say. February we had 90s, and then when it came to May it didn't really warm up. It would get up and then it would drop down, so the plants that I started before actually died. So I have this one, and again, space I've cleaned out because I'm going to be putting some cool season stuff in here. And I have this plant that the birds had eaten, but it's starting to come on. When it gets hot though, this okra tends to grow really fast, so I'm still going to get some, but not nearly as much as I normally would, because by now I would have been harvesting already. Okay. There is a lavender plant. Looks just like the rosemary, doesn't it? But this is lavender. There's another stevia plant. There you go. Those are Brussels sprouts. It's not the season, but I leave them in because I like to have something planted here. And I've been cutting off the leaves, either putting them in the compost pile, putting them in buckets with water to let them sit, using that as fertilizer, or like I said, just dropping the leaves here. So these are going to be cut down soon. I have a couple of bean plants in here. This I'm very happy about. This is actually a butterfly. Nope, that is not a butterfly bush. This is actually butterfly weed. So I planted this last year. It didn't look like it was going to come up at all last year. It had a small plant like that size, then it died back, but this summer it came all the way up. It produced the little flowers that the butterflies like to eat. They chewed them all down, and now it's going for a second round, so I'm happy about that. Over here we have a cucumber plant. This is actually a volunteer, and right there with it is a sunflower. What I'm doing, I have sunflowers that pop up all on their own. So what I do is I let them grow, and I let other plants that are climbing use them as like a natural trellis. Now I have to look in here because these cucumber plants will produce a cucumber that will be tiny. So for instance, I looked yesterday and there were a couple of cucumbers that were a few inches, maybe 3 inches long, maybe, yeah, about 3 inches long and small. Then I came out earlier when I was starting the video, I saw this, and then looked a little more and I saw this nice big cucumber. I'm gonna have to harvest that because if the cucumber goes yellow, I found out that means the plant feels like it has done its job and it will just die because it's produced the seeds, which was the objective the entire time. Now there is another cucumber that was no size yesterday. Now look at it, it's almost ready to pick. I just like them to get a little thicker. Let's get that out of the way. Get a little thicker towards the end. Okay, do we have any more in here? Because I picked a couple yesterday to make sure this plant didn't have to carry too much during the initial heat. Although it is strong and it's growing vigorously. Underneath here, which you can't see very well, is another kale plant. So something's eating part of it, but I don't care because I have plenty. I don't even mind if this is used as a decoy. This actually is a volunteer that just came up. Here is another bed that I did not plant. There is a bug on my look at that, that was a tiny bee. So I'll talk about that more in a second, but this is a bed I did not plant. There are Shasta daisies where the blooms have died. I'm not going to clip them. I'm going to let it do what it does naturally. But this echinacea came up all on its own. It was a plant that took up maybe 1/8 of the space. Now it's actually starting to dominate the Shasta daisy. I'm going to let it happen naturally. Let nature do what it does. Here is a beefsteak tomato plant that has sunflowers growing right out of the same space. Look how huge this is. So you see those pollinators up there? Look at that. If you can see them, they're like flying all around, all different types. I see lots of different bees, and that's why I placed the pollinator hotel right there. So I'm not having any trouble with getting the fruit of any of the plants that I have, or getting anything to get pollinated, because all around they're here. I have wasps, I have bees. Then if you look here, right next to that beefsteak tomato plant, look at this huge tomato. Let's give you an idea of the size of it. Look at that. Right here is the blue betta salvia. If you notice, you see the different insects. They love this, which was a big reason I planted it, and I just love the way this plant looks. Look at that. Look. Constant activity as soon as it warms up. Behind that is a plant that is, and it looks like the squash family. That's a volunteer. So I just threw one of my little tomato cages there, let it trellis up, and I'll see what it produces. But this is going to be fun once I get something from that. Underneath there is a lunchbox pepper plant, and if we get close enough, you can actually see that there's a pepper down at the bottom. I'll come back and pick that later. Look at this. This is a Scotch bonnet pepper plant. Look, I have peppers on there to pick. This is a very hot plant, used a lot in West Indian cooking, which I happen to enjoy a whole lot. This is another lunchbox pepper plant. I don't know if this has anything on it. I think I've picked everything that was here. Yeah, but it'll produce more. Here is a huge celery plant. It's a Utah celery. Over in the back there, if you look, you'll see another tomato plant. Those are homestead tomatoes. Those are actually the best producers as far as my area. They're very easy, along with, if you look over past that leaf, those large cherry tomatoes. They're right behind the beefsteak tomato plant. So those are actually in 25-gallon fabric pots. Let me show you those pots. There you go. Those are in those 25-gallon pots. And this is also in one. Okay. So there's the homestead. Lots and lots of tomatoes on there that are going to be ripening up. This is the large cherry tomato plant. See how that's producing. And that beefsteak tomato plant again. Here I have some thyme. I just let this come up as it will. I have to pull some of the grass out and clean that up. And I water this periodically, not as much as it might like, but it's going to survive. This is very hardy in my area. See more marigolds. I like to intersperse those throughout. I like to intersperse different plants that have different fragrances. I believe that it, besides attracting the insects, some plants are supposedly deterrents for certain bad insects. And over here is another Brussels sprout. The reason you see so many of those is because I failed at that before, so I planted them in multiple places just to see how I would do. One thing I found is by having all these pollinators, I don't have the same issues of plants being eaten down terribly. So I will get a few holes, but there are so many other insects here that they keep the populations in check. What I found, I saw wasps. I'll see them, they'll go between these leaves, and I wondered, I'm like, wasps don't eat these sorts of greens as far as I know, and I realized I don't see any sort of like white fly much. I don't see aphids. And I realized what they're doing is they are killing the insects that would be killing my plants. So thank you to the wasps. And here we have a Pekin pepper. Pekin sounds to me like pequeño in Spanish. At least that's what I'm going to stick with. And if you look at these cute little peppers that are all over it. I'm going to let them grow and see how big they get. I have tasted one or two, and they are hot, as the information said. These were actually freebies that I got from Zella Jakey Farm, which is a place that I get seeds from on Etsy, so check them out. Everything I've gotten from them has been good. They've all germinated well, and no, they have no idea that I'm mentioning them. There's nothing in it for me. I just want to pass on information so that other people have good sources to get their stuff. Here are some bush bean plants. These are loving the heat. They've actually grown an inch or two since the heat actually came up. Okay. Here we have a dark opal basil plant. Right here we have an eggplant. This is a Black Beauty eggplant. I grow this every year. I eat some. I give some to friends who love to make dishes. Now you'll see some damage here. This damage is from the Japanese beetle, otherwise known as the June bug. They did not eat this plant down the way they normally would have. I would have had to use something like diatomaceous earth or something else chemical in order to stop them. This year I would just come out, I'd pluck them, and the high insect population, I believe, is keeping these guys in check too. So this plant is still growing well without having any kind of insecticide. I haven't used insecticides at all in this garden this entire season. And look at that. There's an eggplant there. And let's see. We have some more flower buds. You can see them. Let's see right there. Trying to show you. There you go. So I'm going to be getting eggplant off of this. Once it comes on, they really produce well. I had read that you're going to get, I don't know, 4 to 6 or something like that. I grew one in the ground in a bed last year. I probably got about 20, 25 eggplant off that thing that were good size. So those sizes are just maybe a guideline or a minimum. That's how I look at them. Okay. more dwarf blue kale. The grass that you see there is actually, that's mostly winter rye. Some of it is grass that came up from the ground, but I actually followed what I Am Organic does on a very, very small scale. He does it on a big scale. And I used winter rye in this bed in order to bring some nitrogen in, and I have had to do almost no fertilizing. I've given it some fish fertilizer once or twice just because, not because it looked like it needed it, but I thought that I should give it a little boost. This is doing well, so that winter rye trick worked well, except I need to chop the grass all the way down, and also there's some cleaning that has to be done here, but that's fine. Here's a strawberry plant that was actually a plant I did not really care to keep, but it was alive, so I stuck it into this pot, didn't give it any nutrients. It started to grow, so I am gonna probably take this and put it into something better and let it grow again for next year. These are just resilient. It'll keep coming back in my climate. I'm in Northeast PA if I haven't mentioned it. Over here, sweet potato plant. This is one of the plants I gave some nutrition to yesterday with the organic water-soluble fertilizer. See, I see these leaves here looking purplish. You see that? So to me that says phosphorus issue, and that I can't tell whether that would be boron or magnesium, but that fertilizer that I used, it was actually Nature's Care organic water soluble. That should take care of that. And I notice I'm starting to see some green in the middle there already. That was fully purple, so I think that I might have done the right thing here. These are just some hollyhocks. This is their second year, so they've bloomed and they're dying. Here are some blanket flowers. I just threw them in because I had some seeds and wanted to use the seeds. There's some thyme. So this bed here is really just to attract pollinators. Right? In the back, see some blue, what is that, bachelor button? Blue bachelor button. They didn't get large, but they had gotten eaten down by something. I think it was the rabbits. And they are producing some flowers, so some insects are attracted. There's Shasta Daisy again. And again, here is another butterfly weed, and it got eaten down. By the way, the butterfly weed is actually attracting the butterflies. I see black swallowtails around, and I've seen black swallowtail caterpillars around here. And I really enjoy looking at butterflies, so that was fun. Okay. Over here, chives. I don't do anything with this. I let it grow. I'll clean it up. I'll pull out the clover. I let it put the nitrogen in because clover does fix nitrogen. And then I'll cut all of these off. So this is actually going to produce more. Look, it's going to produce more chives. Next year, that just comes back. There's echinacea. I just stuck it in a pot because it came up, and it's coming back. Right here are some carrots. These are actually French gourmet carrots. Look at me. I'm not necessarily a gourmet vegetable guy. I let somebody else take care of that. But these are actually the size of golf balls. You probably can't see them well, but they grow to about the size of a golf ball, and they're really delicious. And here are my lawn carrots. So these are doing well. You know, I'm glad I don't have too much green. I've had it so that the green grew like super high, and I ended up with small carrots. So this I'm gonna let carry through until it actually gets very cold, because I found one year I forgot about carrots, left them actually in the pot, and over the winter they continued to grow. The pot had contact with the soil, and I ended up with carrots that were like 3 inches around and was 7-8 inches long. Very good, by the way. Here is a Swiss chard plant that I put in, and of course there goes some other volunteers that I don't necessarily need. Here's a tomato again. I'm gonna pull you out, guy. There you go. Don't need that in there. Okay, this is some weed. I don't know the names of all of them, but you can come out. Okay, that kind of looks like a carrot, but it is more than likely, let's see, yeah, chamomile.
because that spreads itself easily. So my Swiss chard is actually coming up nicely. This was a tiny plant before the heavy rain. It's actually grown, I'd say, about a good inch and put on. The leaves have gotten bigger just in the day. So as it cools off, that's going to do well. Anybody who's seen Swiss chard knows this is going to be a good sized plant. All right. I'll pull that chamomile out later. I just like the smell of it when they grow, so I'll walk by and rub it.
Here's more stevia. Oh my goodness, there's so many pollinators. You can't see them probably, but they are all over the place, all around me. And it's getting hot, so I won't be out here very long because I did not do anything to protect myself against those pollinators. And while most of them leave you alone, sometimes they fly in your ear, your nose, and it is not fun. So here is another lavender plant. I just love this. Ah, man, that smells so good. You guys got to grow some lavender if you're not. I'm going to have some in the house. And this is the tiny rosemary plant that I told you I still had out here. Notice how similar that looks. So this is rosemary, see? And this is lavender. See how similar they look? You can tell there are some differences, but it's not immediate that you can see. So in here, there's more butterfly. No, actually, that's milkweed. And I'm going to be planting that out. You know, I'll keep that there. I don't care if it's small. And I'll put that in the ground, in a bed, or I'll put it out in a bed, in the ground, or in a pot as the season cools off. And here is another volunteer plant that just pops up. This, I want to say, is a cucumber plant. Okay. And those are just, that looks terrible, doesn't it? But believe it or not, if I clean that plant up, and I think I'm going to do it just so I can show you, clean that plant up and stick it into some good soil with space, that is actually going to grow and produce. As terrible as it looks now, that plant will survive. Okay, there are some more bean plants. Well, that's actually a bean plant, and there are a couple. I put 4 in, 3 came up. They were old seeds, so I figured I might as well get them in there. So I'll get a few beans, and of course they'll fix some nitrogen in this pot. And I'm going to plant something in the middle as the season goes on. I'll take something like one of the starts I have and stick them in. Right there is an interesting plant. This is mountain mint. I'm growing this because this is a native plant, something that will come back, and it will attract lots and lots of pollinators. I'm probably going to start more of those in the house over the winter. I don't know if you can see, there are like so many pollinators here. Okay, back on track. So I'm probably going to start more of those in the winter so that I can put that around. I'm trying to actually grow more and more plants that I don't have to come back and replant every year. Okay, there's another bean plant. Let's see. Oh, there we go. And that, okay. So these are coming up. Nice. Okay. Happy about that. There's some more sunflowers there. Let's see. There you go. That's better. Look at that. Anything under there? Okay. Again, 3 out of the 4 bean plants came up. More echinacea. Okay. Now this is another volunteer plant. I did not know what it was. And another video I was making, I said, hey, this is going to be a nice squash plant. I'm going to get some squash off this. But then I looked here, and wow, look at that. That is a hairy plant there. What is that? Now, so I look, and I say, that doesn't look like squash, but I also grew watermelon. It's a small type of watermelon. I'll probably think of it as soon as I walk away. I think that might be what this is, but we'll find out because it's doing well and it's growing. Again, I love volunteer plants. I love surprises. Okay. Over here, anybody recognize this? That's comfrey. Did you guys see that huge bee that just flew off? Wow, that was huge. They don't scare me, but I notice how large they are. This is a great plant. I take this and I use this for fertilizer. I'll put it in some water, just let it sit a few days, and it produces a nice fertilizer. And the flowers actually attract lots and lots of pollinators, and they're very pretty. And this is actually growing in just some clay soil. I stuck it down there. I did put a little bit of organic soil to get it started, but I stuck them in the ground at the end of last season, and this is what they've produced up to this point. This is also the Russian type of comfrey, so it's not the comfrey that is going to seed and spread all over and take over. So that's the reason I got this. Again, I got this from Etsy, and I believe this was also from Zelajaki Farms. Here is a volunteer mustard green. This was a bed. I just fight with this. So I've had lots of stuff growing here, but I decided that what I was going to do is let it naturalize a bit. I'm going to pull out the weeds. I'm going to take the clover, pull that out. See, I don't mind clover. You'll see that in different places because it fixes nitrogen, so it actually helps. Now, here's a plant that got eaten pretty well. I don't even fertilize this plant really because there are lots of nutrients in there. What I did is I took lots of the like the leaves from the Brussels sprouts and also other greens that I have, and I put them under this on this bed, and then I put some soil on top. So the nutrition is coming from that. So by the way, using the leaves and all of the other things and just putting them in a pot and letting them grow, that's something that I learned from watching Robbie and Gary. Robbie does that as her method, and she grows everything easily. She'll take some of her whatever she has, whatever food material is left, she'll put it in the pot, she'll put some soil on top, and of course that brings in the worms. They break it down and you get some food. She has a lot of stuff that comes up without trying. So you're going to find that I'm going to mention a lot of folks because I learn a lot from reading, from watching a lot of folks on YouTube. So if I was to say one guy is my main guy and I'm going to go away from this plant, he'd be like, why are you showing that plant and telling him I'm your main guy? Let me go someplace. So now, my main guy, as I was about to say, is Gary Pilarchik, the Rusted Garden. The reason is he's very experienced, he has lots of good techniques, and I happen to be in zone 6B and he's in zone 7. So I can literally follow what he's doing, which is what I've done when I'm trying to plant something new. And the time that he plants things is perfect because I can watch him and say, hey, I forgot something, and I have about 2 weeks that I can go and I can follow and do the same thing with him. He also has a nice grow series. I really have learned a lot from him. I've learned a lot from another site, Callie Kim. She might have called it Callie Kim and the camera guy now, but she's in California. While all of her techniques work very well, the only reason I can't follow everything is because her season is different. I think she's in zone 9, but very good information there also. So look, oh man, I love this look. So now you see this is starting to bend. Like, hey Keith, how are you going to grow these tomatoes with this leaning? Well, because I put this post here, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this and I'm going to pull it back over and I'm going to attach it to that, and that's going to keep it sturdy, and I will continue to get all of these beautiful homestead tomatoes. Look at that. Look at that. And just so you all know, my base of my program, my fertilizer and nutrient program, are worm castings that I produce. I shouldn't say I produce, that are produced in my worm farm by mostly Indian blue worms, because that's what's been there. Now I have some red wigglers and some European night crawlers I'm experimenting with. That's my base program, and let me tell you, I think that that's the best for a base. I would even hazard to say that it's been better than the manure that I use. Now I will say that I'm using bagged manure, so it's not fresh manure. I'll try to buy the bag and let it sit for like 6 months or so before I actually use it to actually make sure that it's all processed. But worm castings, you'll see these plants, look at the size of them. That's the basis. I'll use bone meal, blood meal. Look at this. But the worm castings, I'm telling you, give it a shot. And only thing you need to do, if you have the time and the inclination, you can get yourself some worms. You can get yourself a plastic bin You can use shredded paper, or you could get some cocoa if you want to get fancy. I'll use, some cocoa peat. And then you take your scraps, like when you have vegetables that have gone bad in the house, or you have your coffee grinds, you can take that stuff, your old fruits, and put them inside with the worms. They'll process them down. You get worm beddings from things that you would actually throw away. So literally, that is, once you get the worms and you get the bin going, it's free fertilizer, and those worms multiply. I started out with like one set of worms. Now, just the Indian red wigglers, I have like 6, 7 bins. I say to myself, why am I doing this? It's because I just love to see nature work. And now I have more and more that I can use in my garden. I have actually given it to my mother. My mother still lives in Manhattan, and she put it in her plants. Oh my goodness, her plants are growing ridiculously, and she hasn't used any other fertilizer but the worm castings, and she'll fill in the soil once a year. That's it. Look at that. That's basil, and here's an opal basil. I love growing these. They go to flower. I'll pinch the flowers off, but I'll let them continue to grow because these guys right here are fantastic for pollinators again. And I found that I have basil galore. I have enough basil to share with the neighborhood. So while I like the plants, I don't have to actually harvest this. Sometimes I'll come and pull a leaf off again. Ah, man, that smells so good. Wow. Here's a small celery plant. And this is the same as that Utah celery. It's just, as you can see, not getting as much sun because it's dry. Okay, and I mentioned that I will let my herbs and things go to seed because they attract the pollinators. Now, I don't know if you can see it because some spread out and kind of left when I came over, but do you see the bee there? You see that? They're all over this thing, and there are small bees in there. Once I walk away, I guess because I'm moving, I don't know if it's the shadows, they'll like disappear, but look at this. So I don't have any problem with any sort of pollination, and what I'm going to do, looking at this, is now I'm going to clean this up this weekend and get this ready to actually put some of the cooler season crops in. Now, I wanted to point this out to you. This is a makeshift fountain for the birds. So this, I have to clean that out. Did you see that? See the bird fly by? This actually is for the birds. That's funny, this is for the birds. So they fly, they come here, they bathe, they drink, and what happens is the water ends up with their stuff. I'll just say it like that. I'll pour that right into the bed, and you know that using like chicken manure is another great fertilizer. My plants grow. And the other thing it does is I have different fruits. When the insects actually get thirsty and it's very hot, they and the birds will go and they will peck, particularly the birds I should say, will peck at your fruits. You'll find holes in them. So when you put these fountains around, instead of going to your fruits and plants, they will actually come here and get their water. So if I come here later today, I'll actually see wasps all around this plant. And there's Max. Come here, Max. Come. Say hello to the people. Say good morning to the people, Maxie. You hear Vinny? You gonna go say hello? I gotta take you in. You're panting a little bit, buddy.